The Aboriginal Australian Dreamtime and Afterlife, where African thresholds are social places and Tibetan thresholds, windswept ridges, Australian Aboriginal cosmologies make country itself speak. The dreaming Chukurpa or Chukurpa is both origin and ongoing presence. Songlines sue people to place and ancestors remain in country rather than elsewhere. Gates and thresholds, landers portal, sacred sites, waterholes, and songlines. The dreaming Chukurpa is not once upon a time. It is the living grammar of country. The creation beings who shaped the waters and stones did not retire after making them. They remain present in those places. Their journey is recorded as law, ritual, and story. Country is person and precedent at once. To stand on a waterhole or a carved rock is to stand in company with an ancestor who still has something to say. This is the first and most radical lesson. Land is not inert backdrop. It is the continuing chords and covenants. If the dreaming is the law book, songlines are its GPS. A songline, a dreaming track, is a trail of verse, dance, and memory that threads rock, water, and plain into a continuous story. Sing the line and you can find the water, a safe crossing, the place of law. Sing it wrong and you will be a stranger. These song cycles carry geography and moral prescription together. They map where to go and how to behave when you get there. They are mnemonic highways that encode food, law, kinship, and the names of beings that made the country. For elders and custodians, repeating the songline is not nostalgia, it is maintenance work that keeps country alive. Now, sacred sites, waterholes, rock shelters, scared trees, ochre pits are not mere backdrops to the story. They are the story's residential addresses. Each site has a story, often tied to a particular creator being. And those stories are enforceable obligations. A waterhole that belongs to a certain dreaming owes respect. A rock art panel is not decoration, but a register that holds ancestral precedence. When people perform ceremony at these places, they are not honoring heritage in the museum sense. They are renewing a contract, feeding the country its own song so it will continue to feed the people. The practical upshot is simple. Certain places are sacrosanct. Ceremonies there are elders' business, and permission always must be sought and given. Threshold practice is often tactile and culinary. Smoking ceremonies, smoldering native plants and letting their smoke wash over people and place are a common way to clear, welcome, and reorient. The smoke is medicine and map. It cleanses an entrance, names who may pass, and helps the living retreat their relationship with spirits of place. Likewise, the repetition of a deceased person's song or the careful singing of the dreaming drake associated with their country functions to guide the spirit back into its proper locus, rather than into some abstract elsewhere. So, in short, ceremony is directional. It directs spirits back into named country and keeps the living from losing them into generic oblivion. Korombore, clapstick, and storm are not only spectacle, they are juridical and mnemonic action. Public ceremonies gather story, law, and kin into one visible performance. Dancers enact creation journeys, masks and body paint make ancestor presence palpable. and the song rehearsed the exact sequence of places a creation being walked. In a korobore, the community literally walks the country's memory together, and in doing so, they renew rights, responsibilities, and place names for another year. So think of it as a legal assembly, sung and danced into being. Now, custodianship is the structural hinge that makes this all work. Knowledge holders, elders, singers, artists, ceremony leaders are the living archives and gatekeepers. They own the rights to sing certain songs, to speak certain names, and to authorize access. This is not intellectual property in the European sense. It is a social technology of survival. Songs encode water sources, rock stories encode the law, and custodial permission prevents betrayal of the country's capacities. That is why welcome to country and permission protocols are more than politeness. They are practical legalities for survival and for respect. Mortuary practice follows this logic naturally, rather than imagining a single distant land of the dead. Many groups think in terms of return and reintegration into dreaming country. A funeral, a smoking, or a sequence of songs is not a bracketed event that closes a story. It is the act that rehomes a person's spirit in the track they belong to. Funerary rites will therefore be place-specific. A body is returned toward country and names recited in the right order. Korombore or smoking may be performed at the sites that correspond to that person's totem and birthplace. The practical aim is not punishment or reward in doctrinal terms, but continuity. The community secures that the person's story remains legible to both people and country. And there are crucial cautions to make, and make loudly. You see, Aboriginal Australia is not one story, but hundreds. Practices vary by nation, language, and country. What is true for the Western Desert may be different for the saltwater people of the Torres Straits. Coastal and inland logics differ, and some ceremonies are secret, gendered, or restricted by clan law. Respect for authority, locality, and permission is not etiquette. It is the scholarly and ethical baseline. If other underworlds offer gates and ledgers, the dreaming hands your country atlas written in song. It is both less bureaucratic and more exact. Perform the right song on the right stone at the right season, and you don't just remember the place, you activate it. And that activation is the afterlife work here. Maintenance, not incarceration. Transit and Psychopomps, song, smoke, and the traveling spirits. When we speak of the travel of a spirit here, think less of ferrymen and more of melodies that point. Smoke that clears away, and people whose task is to keep the route audible. A songline names waterholes, rock shelves, hunting grounds, the place where a totemic being turned this stone into the bend of river. To sing a songline is to trace the itinerary of a creator being back into country, and to give a human voice to the path a spirit should take. In funeral practice, elders will repeat the deceased's country song because that repetition is directional. It reminds the departing presence where to go and what to be. The rhythm is not decorative, it is navigational. For people who live by intimate knowledge of place, a sung line is a map the spirit will recognize. Smoking ceremonies are the other no less essential instruments. Smoke is medicine, announcement, and the doorway cleanser. The chosen leaves, the right plant for that place, are made to smolder. The smoke is waved over a person, a family, or the ground, and in doing so, it clears and orients. In mortuary context, smoke acts to separate the living from what clings to death and to send the country with the right signal, so that the spirit's passage is unambiguous. Practically, you will see an elder take smoke toward a sleeping body, sing a short line, and then send the same scent out over the water that belongs to that person's dreaming. The gestures are small and exact, and for good reason, you see. The wrong plant, the wrong tone, the wrong direction. These are not mere errors of taste, but potential breaches of protocol. Morning song is public pedagogy as well as guidance. The community singers, men, women, custodians privileged with certain lines, may perform sequences of elegy and origin song that recapitulate the deceased's life and map. These songs often name kin, country, and totem. They place a person back into the web of relations from which they came. In some places, the repetition must be precise for a set number of days. In others, it is the pattern of seasons and corroborees that keeps the track strong. The sonic texture matters here. Clapsticks and stomps form a carrier rhythm. The voice layers on top, like an address. So, who performs these acts matters immensely. Not every voice can sing every songline, no. Knowledge is regulated by custodianship, elders, male or female songkeepers, initiation holders, people who have permission from country to sing certain tracks. These custodians are responsible both for the technical correctness of the song and for the moral authority to guide their spirits. The performance of a songline in the wrong context is not only an aesthetic mistake, it is an ethical breach. And that is why protocols of permission and welcome to country acknowledgement of elders, formal requests to perform on country, are practical legalities as much as courtesies. So always seek the right voice. There is variation and specificity you must not gloss over. You see, desert practices emphasize long walking songs and seasonal tracks. Coastal people often fold in water song and reef knowledge. Torres Strait communities have seafaring songlines that guide spirits across tides. Some people bury, some expose, some practice with burial rites. Some songs are shared widely, others are secret. Certain rites are even gender restricted. The work of guiding a spirit, therefore, is a mosaic of local custom. Now, a few technical moments are worth describing because they recur across regions. First, the naming and renaming. When someone dies, their name may be spoken aloud in certain contexts and avoided in others. In some communities, the deceased's personal name becomes taboo for a mourning period and is replaced by a reference to their totem, country, or an interim sobriquet used only in funeral rites, a way to avoid unsettling the spirit of the living. Second, the sequence of songs. Funerary performance often moves from private lament to public corroboree. Initially close family chant in the compound, later the wider clan sings the country songs at sacred sites. And third, the directed offering. Food, ochre, shells, or a token associated with the deceased's totem are placed at the proper site and accompanied by the song. The offering is not simply material. It is a signpost and provision for the journey. Shamans or specialists exist in many places, though the term shaman is external and should be used cautiously here. And the role is often mediatory rather than bureaucratic. They may clear a path through ritual, call the dead's name until it answers, or sing the right variant of a dream track that the departed will recognize. Sometimes elders perform both the role of mediator and the custodianship of country. In other contexts, specialists are called precisely because they hold the skill to disentangle a troubled spirit from the living. Where disputes over land or inheritance exist, these ritual acts also educate. Through song and ceremony, the community determines who has the right to speak a line or to claim an ancestral place. So, never forget the ethics. Many songlines, ceremonies, and rites are secret to initiates or restricted by gender or age. Public retelling of certain songs is a breach. God and inhabitants, ancestors in country, creation beings, and the living law begin with a stone stool warmed by sun and hands, small, ordinary, almost comically domestic. And remember this. In much of Aboriginal Australia, the court of the dead is not a marble bench in the sky, but a place you can step to, a rock you can touch, a song you can sing. The actors are not distant magistrates, but creation beings who left signatures on the lands. Ancestors who still sit in country, and living custodians who read law aloud in song and ritual. If you want to understand how authority works here, don't look for a single office. Look for a practiced voice, a painted panel, and a clan that still knows which rock must be fed first. Start with the creation beings themselves, the dreaming forth ancestral figures, large, knowing, often ambivalent, who shade waterholes, carve cliffs, and left behind tracks. And those beings are not mythic characters in the way a textbook lists names. They are the law's authors and the law's continuing presence. A creation being's footprint on a stone is not an illustration, but precedent. The story attached to that print explains who may fish there, and a certain dance may be performed and what must be done if someone takes a resource without permission. The landscape carries legal memory. The ancestor story is both origin and rulework. Custodians of country are the living bench. Elders, knowledge holders, and initiated custodians operate like judges in that they authorize access, interpret precedent, and sanction breach. But their authority is embodied in practice and relationship rather than in paperwork. They decide who may sing what songline, who may extract ochre from a pit, and who will lead a corroboree. Their interventions are not arbitrary. They rest on lineages of memorial practice and on a dense matrix of obligation. Rock art, place names, and ceremony are the registers of judgment. Carvings and paintings are not merely decorative. They are the archive. Images record pigment as evidence. To touch a painted panel without permission is not vandalism in the Western sense only. It is a breach of covenants. Ceremonies, in turn, are the courtroom in motion. The dance that tells the story is both evidence and verdict. A corroboree that reenacts a creation being's journey is also an adjudication. It renews rights, reasserts who belongs, and sometimes assigns restitution. The theater here is law. The stakes are real because these performances configure seasonal access, marriage alliances, and resource rights. Masking and embodiment perform governance too. In communities that have such practices, in those contexts, an initiated dancer or performer takes on the presence of an ancestral being and speaks in that being's voice. The pronouncement is then not an opinion but ancestral speech. It carries the weight of time. When that mask declares a transgression or forgives an offender, the community treats the act as binding. Dramatically, that is a powerful device. Performance turns memory into enforceable social acts without need for written codes. Now, courts teach. Children are not merely told the law, they watch it played out in dance and story. The repeated enactment of a creation story is a sequence lesson in ethics and ecology. Here is where you may hunt, here is where you must not dig, here is the song that must be sung to calm the waterhole after a death. Over years, the young learn the precise entanglement of geography and obligation. The law becomes habit, and habit becomes habitus. Social ability rests on small, repeated competencies, not on occasional degrees. Ancestors are often more parental than punitive. Many interactions with the dead are accessory and consolatory. You feed the stool because it is grandmother's seed and because feeding it brings restful dreams, not merely because it averts calamity. The cord, therefore, oscillates between sanction and solace. A reprimand may be followed by a feast. A public naming of a wrong may result in a ritual of reintegration that restores the offender to ritual life. That restorative emphasis is part of what keeps communities cohesive even when conflicts are fierce. Now, Aboriginal Australia is extraordinarily diverse. Practices, taboos and authorities vary by nation, language and even clan. Many ceremonial details are gender-restricted or secret to initiated people. Some sacred sites and songs are not to be filmed, named or published. Ethical practice requires consulting custodians and following refusals. So, do not exoticize secrecy. Treat it as protocol and in law, in any telling. So, court and land are cohesive and co-extensive. A verdict about access to a waterhole is simultaneously a verdict about sustainability. Many prohibitions, no fishing at spawning season, no cutting of certain trees, restrictions on sacred groves, are ecological controls encoded as law. The ancestral story thus functions as a long-term resource management system. In this sense, the court is prudent as much as it is moral. It conserves food, preserves ceremony, and maintains the conditions for future songs. Judgment, reward, and cultural function, return, law, and the continuing dreaming. If the dreaming is a law book sung into being, its verdicts are carried not in parchment, but in ceremony and the steady work of lacekeeping. Judgment here is not a one-off sentence delivered from a remote bench. It is an ongoing economy of reciprocity, pedagogy, and ecological care. The reward is fit country. Waterholes that hold fish, grass that returns for the next season, children who know their songs. And the punishment is the practical consequence of neglect, a dried spring, a failed hunt, the shriveling of a ride to a totemic site. Rituals therefore both audit and repair. Ceremonies rehearse the rules and then, if they must, restore what was broken. People judge by effects. Did the planting thrive? that the hunting proceed did infamously well, and those are the metrics and answers displeasure shows up as abundance. That displeasure shows up as accident or lack. The community reads these signs and acts. A mislibation, an unperformed smoking, a stolen okra block. These are not merely faux pas, but breaches that call for remediation. The media repertoire is direct and pragmatic. Apology dance publicly, a sacrifice to decide a controlled closure of a waterhole for a season. The re-performance of the creation song until the country remembers to be generous again. The remedial ritual is the system's middle way. It is neither punitive cruelty nor sentimental indulgence. Restitution is performed precisely because social life depends on it. If someone poisons or grove through toughness cutting, the answer is not axle alone. It is careful, labor-intensive repair, replanting, offerings, a ritual of apology that teaches learning and binds the offender back into the network. The public performance of remorse, the mask bow, the elders' public naming, the communal feast, does two things at once. It heals the offended sacred place and it rehearses for bystanders what must be done tomorrow. In that rehearsal, the law is both taught and enforced. The festivals where ledger is balanced publicly, corroborees and ceremonial seasons are the communal audits. Rites are reasserted, that's shown, stories resung, so the young learn who belongs and under what terms. In these gatherings, ancestors are represented through dance and paint. Obligations are made visible, rusted grudges are aired and often dissolved in the heat of movement and the small decency of shared foods. Theatre here is governance, dramatic, corrective, and instructive. A vital spine of the system is custodianship. Elders and knowledge holders act as the living memory and the executors of judgment. Their authority is not simply seniority, it is a competence encoded in songs, in law places, in the very muscle memory of how to walk and trek. They determine who may sing a sacred line, who must be initiated before handling a certain painting, who steps forward to make restitution. When they pronounce that a wrong has been repaired, the community accepts it because those elders carry a memory that makes the decision credible. Or in other words, legitimacy is social and performative. It rests on demonstrated fidelity to the dreaming's requirements. Much of the dreaming's legal fabric is resource law. Prohibitions, no fishing in certain lagoons during breeding, permissions. Only certain families may take ore from that pit. And seasonal closures are not arcane taboos, but time-tested conservation. The stories about creator beings are, in this register, ancient resource management plans, or protocols that have kept species and water through generations. Thus, the dreaming's judgments are not metaphysical whims, but adaptive practices that have supported survival in difficult environments for millennia. The systems are resilient because they are porous. They have absorbed new faiths, legal systems, and economic pressure by keeping their core function, regulating relations between people and place. Christian prayers may now sit alongside the songlines. Native title claims in modern court sometimes rest on the old registers and on the testimony of elders. Filmmakers must always seek permission. This adaptability is strength. Law that can be sung is law that can be told to a new generation and translated into new forums. But always with the caveat that custodial authority must be recognized. The moral pedagogy is precise. Children learn the law by watching elders repair, by attending corroborees, by learning which places are fed first and which names are not to be spoken lightly. Memory technologies, rock art, place names, carved posts, serve as evidence and classroom. The dreaming's verdict are thus transmitted as habit and memory, not as a catalogue of sins. They are practical instructions for how to keep life on country sustainable and sacred. There is a humility built into the system that is worth lingering on. Where some cosmologies cast the dead into eternal reward or condemnation, the dreaming prefers repair, continuity, and an ethic of stewardship. The sacred is not merely an otherworldly ledger, but a living contract with land that requires daily maintenance. Judgment, then, is not the last word, but an invitation to return, to re-perform the songs, to repair the scar, to retell the relation between human and country. And that invitation is the serious recurring kindness. It reveals as final, irrevocable donation in favor of a practiced communal work of making things right again.